Welcome to the Operate Intelligently podcast, the podcast for all things operations.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. We're excited to have you here, or welcome back if you've listened with us before. I'm your producer, Grace Black, and I just want to take a quick minute or two to check in with your host, Josh. So, Josh, you've been doing a lot of interviews around the pandemic for the past few months, talking to a lot of different people and different types of organizations. What are some of your big takeaways that you've had?
Wow, that's a long list of takeaways. The biggest that I've got is our people. The people that we serve are really amazing. They have been resilient. They've gone through they're in the 6 stages of disaster. We're in number 5, and they've weathered quite the storm, and they've done it standing tall with their teams and accomplished a lot under unforeseen social distancing, mask wearing, state shutdown, government shutdown, country shutdown, and adjusted the sails as they needed to ride with the wind. And they've really innovated. There are so many stories of new innovation, new ways, new processes. I thought one of the coolest things was when I was talking to Chris Phillips about they're doing going out and doing inspections, and they were doing them via Skype, where the resident was taking their phone and going down with a camera and showing while the inspector was in the driveway, watching and videoing and recording that, and then documenting it. So just the resiliency and the just incredible work that we get to help our clients do every day is the real big takeaway.
That's so true. It's been amazing to see just the positivity and, like you're saying, the innovation that's coming through, and how people kind of wanting to help each other, weather the storm together. I think that's been really powerful. So just want to put another plug in out there. If you haven't listened to the kind of COVID themed podcast we've been doing for the last few months, please go back. They're on all different kinds of topics. So find some favorite ones and definitely check those out. So I did want to introduce the interview that we have coming up today with Shannon. And this was recorded a little while back, I think maybe in December. So tell us a little bit more about this interview, Josh.
Yeah, so this was recorded actually in Anchorage, Alaska, the first week in December. Shannon Rasic works for the Anchorage Public Schools, and the previous year in 2018, I went up, and as I was making my way to Alaska, Anchorage had sustained a massive hit of an earthquake. I think it was around it was over 8 on the Richter scale, but the close proximity to actual Anchorage proper, it was a mile offshore, was the epicenter. So it caused incredible destruction and devastation. Amazingly, no lives were lost, which is a testament to the buildings post the earthquake. I think in the 60s that was 9+ magnitude. That a lot of different engineering requirements. A lot of the big buildings are on rollers. So the hotel I was in 2018, we got aftershocks in the 6s, and the building shook back and forth, but it was incredibly structurally sound because the building actually sits on rollers. So it's designed to actually move with the earthquakes. But with that said, the Anchorage Public Schools didn't have a single building in their district that didn't sustain damage. And Shannon and her team were responsible for managing, repairing, getting the schools to be for reoccupying, and also documenting everything to ensure any claimable work that is done, that they had everything that they needed to be able to submit those properly and best ensure their reimbursement, as well as showing the work they did. Because it was
awesome.
a ton in a short amount of time.
Yeah. Well, I think y'all will really enjoy hearing this interview, so we'll jump into that now.
Good afternoon. This is Joshua Peach with Dude Solutions, and I am here in beautiful Anchorage, Alaska in December. It's raining and in the 40s. It's typically like 0 and snowing, but unusually warm. And I am lucky enough to have with me from Anchorage Public Schools, Shannon Rasic. Said that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, wonderful. And Shannon has been a lifelong resident of Alaska, and I was talking earlier this morning at the Alaska ASBO conference, and we were talking about the earthquakes that hit last year, and a lot of people don't know this, but there's over 10,000 earthquakes that happen in Alaska every single year. It accounts for 11% of the total earthquakes that happen in the world. And last December, before this conference, same time last year as we are here, December 7th or 8th.
It was 11:30.
On what?
So November 30th.
Oh, November 30th. Mm-hmm. I came up on the 1st, I think, of December. I came up the day after. What was that? To talk about the earthquake. That was a big one. That was a doozy.
So it was a Friday, November 30th at 8:29 a.m. in the morning. I think the final number they gave out was a 7.1 magnitude earthquake that hit just a little bit outside of Anchorage on Mount Eklutna. And it was huge. And it lasted for what felt like forever. Everybody was frantic and didn't know what to do.
There was holes in the roads.
Yeah.
It was devastating.
Giant holes, bridges falling apart. And just about every school in the Anchorage School District had some extent of damage.
How many schools are there in Anchorage?
There's 80-something schools, but 90 facilities.
Okay.
Overall.
Was this the worst earthquake you've experienced here?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so 8:30 in the morning, school, everybody's getting ready to go to school. It's dark out. What a lot of people don't know is, it doesn't get light until about 10 o'clock in the morning and then gets dark at 3. So it's still dark out. Kids are just starting to get into school. Earthquake happens. And 90 buildings, in essence, are getting hit with this, rattled and shook, and some have more damage than others. Any completely destroyed where they're not going to get rebuilt? Or
So there's two, Eagle River Elementary and Gruening Middle School, that have a severe damage, and for a while there it was questionable whether we were going to rebuild or just repair.
Yeah.
I think the conclusion is that we're going to repair them, but it's not cheap.
Are they newer schools or are they older?
No, they're older.
Okay, so they probably aren't built up to the standards were they prior to the last big one, which was in
64.
Yeah.
Yeah. Eagle River Elementary actually had similar damage in the 64 earthquake. They rebuilt the certain wing of the school, and then same thing happened again. But Gruening, I don't think, was around then.
The building we're in was built after the 64 earthquake, which was like a 9 magnitude, right? If I remember correctly. It was up there.
So I think that the difference was how long it lasted. I think it lasted for quite a while.
Yeah.
So.
And then the center of it was really, really close. It was like a mile away from Anchorage proper, if you will. But when I was here, there was a 5. There were some aftershocks, and there was like a 5, and the building was like swaying. And everybody goes, don't worry about it. It's on rollers. It's fine. It was built after the 64, which changed all the regulations of how you built buildings.
And that's what kind of saved our city is Anchorage Code after the 64
Yeah.
earthquake. Anchorage Code kind of tightened up, and could have been a lot worse if we didn't have that.
You might know this. I'm sure you do know this. And I want to make sure I have the statistic right. But that earthquake was the first with a 7 magnitude or greater that didn't have a single fatality. Does that sound right?
Yeah. We didn't have any.
Yeah, there was no fatalities. I mean, I don't think you had. You think you had a handful of injuries, but it was
not even that really.
Dishes fell on people's heads or something, and that it was limited, but it wasn't anything. I remember reading that. I'm 99% sure. So somebody do a search and call me out on it. But I think this was the first earthquake with a 7.0 or greater magnitude that didn't have a single fatality, which is amazing when you think about it. It barely even made the news. It happened and it was on the news, and then within a couple days. But you guys are unbelievably resilient. I mean, how long were the school out for? A couple days?
10 days till all schools. So the earthquake happened on a Friday. So luckily we had 2 weekends in there where we could get a lot of the repairs done. So
basically 5 business days of school was all you guys, or 6 if you count Friday. That's amazing. So cleanup. You got a mess, right? What is that like? Because that would probably resemble, any natural disaster. Obviously, yours is on a much larger scale. It's a much constant, a tornado comes through, it'll cut through one line. You guys had your whole district affected. But what does that look like? What does that entail? How long does it take? Where does the repair come from? How does the money tell the story as far as how that after effect looks.
Yeah, so after the earthquake happened, we established our emergency command center, and kind of the first thing we did is we deployed project managers and maintenance guys to all the different schools. We have them divided into zones. So there's like a zone binder where they can take notes of, what they see and what damages are out there. And then as we get that information back, that's how we decide to best allocate our resources. So the custodians, they were the ones that did a lot of the heavy lifting with the cleanup. A lot of them started in their schools that they're normally at, because we have custodians at every school. So that was helpful, but then we shifted them around. And then the maintenance guys, after the first few days of getting reports on the damages, we decided to bring in 3 local general contractors that we work a lot with. Some of them we already had existing contracts with, and we kind of divided the schools between in-house and them.
Yep.
And so they deployed their own teams, hired on people out of the labor hall, just to come help with this earthquake. And it was a lot. It was, everything was kept track of in an Excel. People were calling into a phone, reporting what they saw. I'd say the damage consisted mostly of ceiling tiles that fell, sprinkler heads that broke off, and water went everywhere, domestic and glycol leaks, lots of cosmetic cracking, some structural. So
you get the total price tag on that?
I think so. On what we've done so far, if I had a ballpark, I'd say probably about $15 million is expenses to date. But to bring every school whole, it's going to be $50 million plus.
Wow.
So there's still a lot of work to do out there.
And most of that's covered from under insurance policies. No.
Earthquake insurance is really hard to get in Alaska. And
well, with 10,000,
yeah.
I mean, it's the likelihood of you having one is 100%. It's whether or not it does damage is the next question.
Yeah. So we had we didn't have earthquake insurance, but we had sprinkler leakage insurance. So everywhere a sprinkler pipe broke, and water went everywhere, we were able to claim that.
That was covered. Yeah. Curious about stimulus funding and how it could help your organization? Join our webinar, Stimulus Funding, What You Need to Know Now, on Wednesday, June 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll help you navigate through this time with a lively panel discussion with industry experts to gain tips around what type of stimulus funding will likely become available, how you can prepare to submit your organization for funding opportunities, and how to use your operations data to make the biggest impact with funds. Register via the link in the show notes. And I'm not familiar enough with it, but you were able to do some sort of funding through FEMA, or what is okay?
We're still working with FEMA a year later, and still in the beginning process. It's going to be forever, it feels like.
So do they require, this whole thing came up about discussing with kind of what Dude does. We're offering, we provide software to track and manage work orders and preventive maintenance and all that stuff. And one of the things that is often overlooked is it's great for the day-to-day. It's great that we have it someplace, and we're not in an if something happens. Sadly, we're in a when something happens of whether it's natural or whether a sprinkler breaks on its own, or sadly a kid pulls the shower in the science lab that's always on the top floor and leaves it running, and the clog's drained, and because it never gets used and floods out 3 other floors. How did Dude help with the submissions or the management, or you said you had stuff coming in from all angles? How did we make a difference if we did?
Well, I don't know what we would have done without the work order system, because being a district of our size and 90 facilities with hundreds of people out there doing who knows what, having the work order system was really the one way where we could have a record of what was going on and be able to report on it after the fact, have people track their labor hours to it. One of the first things we did when the earthquake hit was we created a earthquake project in the work order system, so that every work order that came after those few days, and even still today, work orders where people find something else that was broken. it allowed us to be able to report and kind of handle that mass of data more easily than we would if we were trying to stubby pencil it or have people fill out logs of what they did and where they were.
Or just a spreadsheet, even an Excel spreadsheet that you guys were fielding calls on. That's, I mean, I can't remember the first, I think it was the one of the big snowstorms we had on the East Coast, and New Jersey got pummeled, and we've got a ton of clients there, and they were talking about how they utilized our software for, FEMA tracking, reporting, and even taking photographs. What they were able to utilize was that, some things for preventive maintenance, they'll photograph every time they do a PM out there, just as maybe a piece of equipment to just see if it's aged, if it's near the ocean, if it's rusted more, what have you, and to be able to take those historical photos and say, hey, here's what this was, and here's where it was. And I just learned a bit I was at Gulf Coast State College, which is in Panama City, Florida. They got, just entire buildings disappeared. Homes just washed away, and it's, tracking and showing, hey, there was a house here. Like, how do you know? Like, it's gone. It's just a plot of land. So just to have that historical information. So when something like this happens, you start to track, you start to put everything in, you put a project in. Are you submitting that information directly from Dude, or those reports directly from Dude, or you have to do other stuff?
We have to do other stuff to them. So we usually submit a work order detail report with every type of other submission we're doing with FEMA just on the back end, so if they want to track that through, they can. Another thing that we did right after the earthquake that was really helpful with all the financial accounting of all the different expenses was we added a work order field to all of our credit card purchases and POs, so that when we're allocating those to the certain account and budget, with that work order number in there, we can report and merge that with quarter report, and it'll tell you this purchase was here and this amount.
So when I was growing up, there wasn't a lot of planning, preparation, thought that something might happen. It's a much different world today. Not only do we have earthquakes that happen everywhere, you guys just happen to be in the jackpot of that. Tornadoes, which are popping up. There was one just in Dallas, right in downtown Dallas, destroyed 27 school buildings 2 months ago. Unheard of. Floods, snow events, hurricanes. One of the largest destructions was a gas. We had gas blasts. Gas. Whether it's on trains, there was an explosion with a series of trains in the Midwest years and years ago that destroyed a couple school buildings. So now we really need to be in when it happens, like preparedness. Like, what are a couple of things that you would say are best practice, must do, have to do to be prepared for anything? Like something happens where you have to have your emergency preparedness team. Like, what are some of your best practices you think are being prepared for when something happens?
So one thing I think that helped us is that we stuck to our standard operating procedure, especially when it came to the work order system and how we track and report things. We stuck to that as close as possible because that's normal business. If we would have tossed all rules and regulations and practices aside and just, let everything turn into mayhem repairs that weren't tracked, then I think we would have a hard time getting reimbursement and trying to note what we did. As for planning in advance, there's the ATC 20, which is a kind of an emergency preparedness training that a lot of people in the district go through, and that teaches you how to identify damages, put the appropriate placard on buildings.
Is that an Alaska thing? Is that ATC 20, or is it something that's federal, national?
I'm not sure.
We'll have to look into that.
I haven't actually had the training yet,
Yeah,
but
we'll
most
have to
of the
look into
people
most of your team has,
So, other things too is just having we have these emergency backpacks put together that we can deploy out with people with all the first aid kits and
go bags. I think is what they're common.
Other than that, as far as preparation, there's always room to get better. There's a lot of things we learned that we
well, that's
wrong,
the whole thing is like it's after it happens, you debrief and you say, and that's probably something you guys are still doing now, which is these constant debriefs and say, okay, what could we have done differently here, or what could we have done differently when this something happens again.
Yeah.
Shameless plug for my friend Paul Tim. He does the go bags. I'm amazed. I had no idea what half the stuff didn't make any sense to me. And he says, well, you're stuck for, something like a blanket, and he's multi-purpose. It's like if you have to, if you're there for 12 hours, you're stuck in a room and people have to go to the bathroom, uses that a curtain, it's like all this stuff that you have in those bags that serve multiple different purposes. Yeah. Well, this was great. This is very informative. I can't thank you enough. We just filled in a quick 15-minute slot here while we're in between lunch and classes, and we're down to 120 seconds before we have to get back and learn. So congratulations, first of all, on what you and your team have done and accomplished. It seems like nothing happened here. I was here 2 days after, and I saw some of the destruction, but the resiliency of Alaskans in general is amazing. But what you were able to do in one of the largest school districts in the country and keep things going with $50 million, estimated in damages, nothing short of amazing, because the most important thing is getting those kids back in the school and learning and feeling comfortable. So congratulations to you and your team. Keep up the great work. We're here to help any way we can, and I really appreciate you sharing your story with us. So till then, I guess we're going to sign off.
Thanks for listening to the Operate Intelligently podcast, produced by Dude Solutions. You can reach us by emailing dspodcast@dudesolutions.com or check us out on the web at dudesolutions.com.